Hello, everyone. My name is Robert Leonardo. I'm going to report on social mobilization continuum based on the framework developed by Valdecañas, Tuazon, and Barcelona from their published book, How Social Mobilization Works, the Philippine Experience. Sometime in the 1980s, the United Nations Children's Fund, otherwise known as UNICEF, adopted a development strategy and called it social mobilization. This framework was developed following this direction as it was intended to be the basis of programs for children and women. Compared to other frameworks, this one is simplified and more focused on the primary actors and processes, setup, the actual steps, the activities, the beneficiaries, and its sustainability. This came from the realization that a holistic approach to improving the situation of the children requires interventions that are in the hands of the sectors of society, such as different organizations in the government, civil society organizations, non-governmental organizations, the religious sector, and so on. In the meantime, there's also a need to convince the parents, families, and communities about the children's health requirements, as they are the ultimate decision makers when it comes to participation in these programs. And they will also be the ultimate driving force in the success of these programs. So this framework focuses on two stakeholders, the multi-sector involved in organizing the social mobilization and the beneficiaries along with their communities and families. Now, let's talk about the first part of the social mobilization, which is where needs and problems are analyzed and identified. Similar to a strategic management practice, social and development work uses the same tool, needs assessment or situation analysis, in order to properly address problems and find solutions in an organized and proven strategy. These two approaches listed here may be likened to the Needs Assessment Continuum by Marty Costa and Serrano Garcia. This continuum have two classifications that correspond to these two elements. One is social change, and the other one is control maintenance, system maintenance. The first one refers to actual social change, where action is built practically from nowhere, or perhaps from what is little that exists, and therefore a radical change is required to make things happen. One example is when an infant immunization is low in a region or a province. The government, among the different relevant agencies, as well as the different sectors of the region, band together from a program to achieve this goal. This sometimes has to start from somewhere and identifying barriers or problems to achieving this. Meanwhile, the second one refers to the existing development work already in place and is intended to keep the status quo. This type is generally very much present, for example, here in Singapore, where development work is stable and is working around the system. Many of the marginalized may have been served already and are working under a particular program, and therefore it just needs to be concerned about how to sustain this and even think of ensuring the program's survival. Notice that both types are focused towards human problems as well as agency survival, and yet they are geared into the same ultimate goal, which is a response to a commitment to the powerless and marginalized to foster change. Now we go to the second part of the framework, which is the actual steps that we see in social mobilization. And this is where we see social mobilization in action. As you see, the first six in the list are the elements of social mobilization, the six elements of social mobilization, which are discussed separately in another report from our group. Essentially, we see that these six are like the building blocks of social mobilization. Without them, it's impossible to have any social mobilization. Now let me discuss in detail the ones at the bottom. Targeting is important to ensure we address the problems with the right persons. We also use participative style of management, seeking inputs from the beneficiaries and the community themselves, hearing from their experiences, making them feel valued, and gives them better motivation in the process as they contribute to the program. While there's a long list of elements that strengthens the way the programs work, as you see here, integrating them to work in a seamless system and cooperation ensures its efficiency and effectivity. At this point in the framework, institutionalization is also sought to ensure perpetuation of the program not only to a set of participants and beneficiaries, but to future ones. Addressing societal issues do not immediately get resolved, and so addressing the issue one community at a time then requires the program can survive through a stable system and not only reliant on certain persons or organizations. This framework have a semblance of flow chart where there's a beginning point and an end point. However, it is not absolute and necessarily in a strict orderly fashion. Hence, I'd like to dwell on another part of the framework as addressed mainly to the organizers of the social mobilization program. Sustainability is a key concern for programs because one cycle of social mobilization is not enough to change a group of persons or a community. It requires repetition of the process to en masse change. Hence, survival is important in a sense that programs need to sustain itself through some mechanism where new people will participate in the program, but also there are supporters that can come to the rescue and contribute their resources in whatever form, be it financial, it can be volunteer work, among others. Therefore, this is the time when we review and evaluate the program as it happens. It will not necessarily happen in the end, but this element is like its own block that happens at any stage. Hence, notice that this framework has a backflow of direction. This is because the process is expected to repeat itself through a self-sustaining mechanism. Notice that the elements of sustainability are already in the other parts of the framework, at the setup stage, along the active process, even on empowerment among the beneficiaries themselves. This because each of these parts of the framework are like blocks to a successful mobilization. Finally, as this framework comes from the social mobilization designed in UNICEF, where parents, families, and communities, along with groups, agencies, and organizations, work together in a collaboration that can be sustained over time. The essence of this framework is to empower the main stakeholders, beneficiaries and their parents, and communities they belong to. In this framework, these beneficiaries are given emphasis to ensure it is working to their advantage. In summary, this framework is a set of building blocks that make up a strong social mobilization system. Each of these elements are important not only as steps, but as essentials not necessarily in order that make social mobilization program work well. Notice also that although there are overlaps, each put an emphasis on a major element of the framework. That's all for my report. I hope you learned the key things about this framework. Don't forget to answer my questions. I've posted them in the forum itself. Thank you for listening and have a good day.